Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Secret Sunday session where we were actually doing a pretty unique series called the Disordered series, where we're going to do a spin-off, a couple of episodes. We're not sure how long it will take at the moment, but I will actually be co-hosting this series with my beautiful mum, Kendall. So we thankfully have mum with us today to kick us off. So welcome, mum, to the podcast.
Thank you, Ashley.
Now, it's obviously going to be a little bit different, a little bit conversational, and this first episode is going to be called The Secret Illness. So, welcoming everyone into this episode, we're here to explore body image, disordered eating, and eating disorder recovery through a lived experience lens. The series is really about having the conversations that often stay hidden. We'll share stories, unpack trends, and talk about tools that help people navigate recovery and support others. Today's episode, as I mentioned, is called The Secret Illness, where we'll be talking about eating disorders, where they're often invisible, how secrecy fuels them, and what happens when the silence is broken. As we are well aware, and if you have been in this space, you can commonly see that eating disorders can exist behind smiles, routines, and the illusion of being fine. But from the outside, everything can look completely normal. So internally, someone may be struggling, and this is where we want to start this conversation. And of course, this podcast, as we do discuss eating disorders and trigger-related content, we want to acknowledge that this episode will discuss some content that people may find triggering. So we'll be sharing lived experiences and discussing signs and impacts of eating disorders. So please take care while listening and pause if you need to. As you know, we are always here to support anyone at the Secret Burden, as well as there's the Butterfly Foundation, Lifeline, Kids Helpline, and Beyond Blue. So to kick us off, I guess, what do we mean by the secret illness? So often, even at our charity, we discussed and we call anorexia through my own diagnosis as the secret burden, something that was hidden. But when we talk about the secret illness, what is it that we actually mean? And a lot of it comes from eating disorders are incredibly misunderstood. Many people imagine they look one specific way, but in reality, they can affect anyone and often remain hidden for years. So, to kick us off today, I really want to start that conversation with you, Mum, around why eating disorders are often invisible and why they thrive off this idea of being secret.
Look, from my experience, I think the reason that it is invisible and is a secret most of the time until you get your diagnosis is mainly because there's probably shame attached to it. And that shame comes from you're probably doing something that is not normal behavior from what you have previously done. So I think deep down, I don't think anyone ever sets out to say this is going to be a secret. I think as you go along, it gets more and more intense. So I think the more and more shame is attached to it, and then becomes a secrecy because you don't want to talk about it because it's a shameful thing that you feel you're doing to yourself. So and that's only from my experience and from the people I talk to and in this space, is a lot of people don't come out and talk about this illness or they have an eating disorder until it's probably crisis time. And for that reason, it's been kept a secret from their loved ones or friends or colleagues, family. And then, I think the people around know that something's happening, but you can't really pinpoint what it is. And having those discussions about is there something wrong is quite can be quite confrontational, and people get angry and things get said. So I think keeping it a secret is a lot easier on everyone involved, and that's only from what we experienced when you first were diagnosed, or we thought something was wrong. It was really hard to have that conversation with you because you just kept it a secret, kept saying nothing was wrong or you were having other issues, nothing around your actual illness of an eating disorder.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think secrecy is a big part of why people are not diagnosed quite early on. I think it's a secret. And I remember when I was going through, like prior to being diagnosed with anorexia, the idea, I mean, I was in denial. I didn't think that anything was happening. So I can't really claim that I was keeping it a secret, but I was keeping it close to me, this idea of being healthy. I sort of told people that I just wanted to be healthy, but underneath, you could potentially, looking back now, understand that I was pursuing quite extreme traits. And I think I was aware of it, even though I was quite young, because I wasn't open about it and I wasn't honest in the real reasons why I was skipping meals, or the real reason, or the real times I was, doing more training or missing out on certain things. Whereas, why wasn't I just open with it? And I think that's sometimes when I look at the difference between, the illness thriving on that and the people that say they have an eating disorder and they don't, if there is that real push or motivation to keep it a secret and keep it to yourself, for me, that's a big indicator that there's an eating disorder there, because I know it's such a big driver for it. Because otherwise, why wouldn't you be open and honest with it? What is it that you're hiding? And for me, I think I didn't want it to be exposed, or I was hiding it. One, because I didn't think there was an issue, but two, because it was giving me that sense of control and that sense of love and worth. And so while I didn't, I guess, consciously recognize that that's what it was giving me, those feelings I didn't want to give up, and I didn't want to expose that in case someone would take that away from me. Did you notice that early on? Like, what would you say would be probably the most secretive things that I was displaying in the early, like, sort of signs prior to my diagnosis? And how did you know that I was keeping it a secret and it wasn't just an open conversation?
Yeah, I think there's two things here. You can be secretive and you can be what's the word? Well, basically you can lie. And let's face it, there was a lot of lying going on. And I think they're two different things. Um, because when we kind of wind back and go at the first instant, like we were all on board with you, correct? Like you just came to us and said, hey mom, I want to whatever the situation was, I think it was netball at the time. Hey, I've had some criticism from my coach. I want to be faster. I want to be fitter. Can you help me with that? And we were all on board, not knowing that the underlining, I suppose, triggers had already started. So looking back on that, I wouldn't say that part was a secret, but with that came other things like, catching you late at night doing exercises, or, you skipping meals and lying about skipping meals. And I think that is two different things, because I don't think you were being secret about that. You were just, to me, flat out lying about what was happening. And I think that is part of the illness too, because I don't think you're doing it. So, and that's a very important part, I think, moving forward from what we've learned, is that the illness really gets its claws in early, and you've got to be on the front foot and know your child from you know them the best way. And we knew, as a little, like when you're a little girl or going through school, that you weren't doing those traits before. You weren't keeping secrets from us or lying about things, and that had started to develop. So I think you know that was a really important first trigger for us as parents that we missed, because we were probably contributing to what you're wanting to do on keeping those secrets and those lies going, because we just thought you wanted to be fit and healthy, and we thought, oh, that's a great incentive, you're a sports person, and let's help you achieve your goal.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny. I don't really remember a conversation coming to you as such from an angle of wanting to improve my performance, because I remember I was quite ashamed that I was getting picked up, that I needed to improve my netball performance, or I needed to be fitter, or I needed to be stronger. I just remember pursuing the behaviors, like doing more training, investing more in eating well, and then you mentioning it or just being curious about it and me
Yeah.
then encouraging you to do it with me. And I specifically remember like the 7 minute workout, like the workout apps with dad. And they were like random exercises that we'd do late at night. And then it'd come from late at night to like nearly every spare second that I'd get. And I'd just be like, oh, dad, do you want to do it with me? And that him, in a way, that was hiding it because it was giving you, like knowing what I know now, it was giving that sense of validation that you guys are in support of the behaviors that I'm taking to extreme without you potentially knowing. And I think back to that, and a lot of people would look at that and think like how innocent that was just to pursue some little exercises. But I was doing that so often and it was on my mind all the time that potentially the illness's way of hiding it was getting you involved in it and in support of it rather than doing it behind the closed doors because I realized more that when I was diagnosed and when we were going through recovery, that almost when the illness was exposed, that's when the lying stepped in, and that's where the secrets became more enhanced than prior. It was more a collaborative, I guess, movement towards supporting my eating disorder traits because of the lack of understanding.
Yeah, correct. And the we were so naive about what was going on. I mean, we had no idea what an eating disorder was. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but I thought you had something else going on. We were having you tested for cancers. We were having you tested for, you were just sleeping a lot. So, we were testing you for all other illnesses. Had no idea that it could have been an eating disorder because when we went through it, it wasn't talked about, and there was no information about these first signs or triggers. And let's face it, a lot of these signs overlap too with other things. So it was really, really hard to determine what was going on to start with. And, whether things were happening for you at school the way that they were happening too, like you were coming home and maybe saying, you didn't want to go to school because you were getting bullied or this was happening or whatever. And so we were taking you on your word on that. And I think, you know, looking back, was that also some of the things for hiding some things that were going on? I mean, it just happened all so quickly, and not knowing what was true and what wasn't was really difficult to navigate. But we're taking you on your word because you're our daughter and we love you and we want to support you and we want to see you flourish. And as a parent, that's what you want for your child. And I think at the beginning, just going back, you said something, and I just remember going, and a few people have said this to me now, oh, we don't want to betray our daughter or our son's trust. We want to trust what they're saying is true, and we don't want to upset them. We want to make sure we have a good relationship with them so we can continue helping them. And I think that was a big part for us too. Deep down, I think I knew something was going on, even though I couldn't pinpoint what it was. I just knew this wasn't you, the way you were behaving and saying things. And I just knew this wasn't the daughter that was you like 12 months ago. So I knew something was happening. I just couldn't pinpoint it. And I wanted to make sure I kept that open relationship with you so I could get the information out. But that's a really fine line, because at some point you have to step in and go, you have to call it for what it is. And if it upsets the person, it upsets the person, but you've got to get the information correct. And that was really hard at the beginning, because I've got your brothers and your dad coming to me going, what's happening with Ash? This is this, blah, blah, blah. And you're trying to navigate everything that's happening and trying to listen to your heart other than your head, going, no, she's, she wouldn't do that, or I don't know. And that's a really, really difficult time at the beginning to go and seek help, because you don't want to betray your trust as parent child. And at some stage, though, you have to just suck it up and go, you know what? I need you to be here other than not here. So, if that means my relationship with my child gets disrupted for a little bit, then that's just what has to happen. And I think that's where, I had to weigh up the secrets that were happening and go, well, is this in the best interest of the health of my child?
Must have been so hard. I think being in the position I am now in my life, which is, many years down the track, different experiences and in different environments now where I'm working with children and, being in and out of relationships around children and realizing, although I'm not a parent now, how much you just want to be their friend, how much you don't want to be that bad parent and you want them to choose you and you want them to love you and be kind to you and to have that relationship. So I couldn't imagine a time when that is tested and you potentially have to recognize that potentially your daughter or your son, the one that you've raised, the one that you've brought into this world, could be deceiving you or could be lying to you. Like, how do you get your head around that? And how do you navigate that as a parent when, in a way, you're fighting that? Like, you don't want to believe that.
I don't look, I don't want to use the word bad parent, but I think you're an irresponsible parent if you sit on your hands or put your head in the sand and pretend everything's okay and it's going to get better on its own. That's not being a good parent. A good parent will step in and go, right, I'm noticing A, B, C, and I need to talk to you about that. Sometimes talking to you about that creates a crisis because of the reaction. And then I think the reaction is a trigger in itself where you go, okay, why are you reacting in that way? You never used to react in that way. So I think, it's all about really asking questions, knowing your child, understanding the environment and going, well, you never used to do that. Now you are doing that. What has changed? And be more curious about the changes, I suppose, without directly saying something's wrong. And, we tried to do that, but it was just too late for us. And hence why we, I suppose, started in this space was if I would have known to step in earlier, then, would we have gone down the path we went down? I mean, we will never know, but that's the great thing about, going through something and being able to educate other people that the earlier you start asking questions, if you think something is wrong or something is happening, the better the outcome's going to be because you can get resources quicker and be, I suppose, manage it better before it gets to that crisis point.
Yeah, I agree, but I think there's also a range between what is stepping in. Like there's degrees of like stepping in and intervention because when I look back, you did step in. Like when we look at prior to my actual official diagnosis, you took me to the doctor multiple times with concerns, and we see it often that people take people for medical intervention multiple times, but they're going to health professionals and they're listening to the advice that they're getting given because these are the people with the degree, these are the people that should know. And then they're going, well, don't worry about it, or you're an overreacting parent, or they're just hormonal, or they're just transitioning, or look at what they're exposed to on social media. It's only natural that they have concerns about their body. It's only natural that their period misses every now and then. How do you know the difference? Like, how do you know when it is actually important to step in and potentially not listen to the medical advice that you're receiving?
Well, I think the first thing is physical appearance, right? So we went
But we know
along.
as well that a lot of eating disorders don't display or don't show in, say, physical appearance. Like body shape is not the true indicator of eating disorder or disordered eating.
Yeah, I agree. But when you know your child was a certain um, image, if you want to call it that, or a certain, body shape, I think you have to step in, like, and right, go on our story, right? So we went from you being active, always wearing clothes that you felt confident in, um, always going to the beach with your friends, wearing bikinis, whatever, having a great time, to covering up your body 24/7, constantly sleeping, and probably avoiding any type of fun activity, to going camping and you come out in a bikini and all I see is skin and bone. So to me, that was a physical appearance that went, we're in trouble. You have lost a lot of weight in 6 months.
Mm.
And that was a
Prior to
real,
that, that's behavioral though, like the tiredness and the withdrawal from friends, like that's more, I guess, behavioral symptoms that would show up, and then the physical being almost a result of not intervening.
I think, yeah, your body was trying to cope with severe amount of change in a short period of time. I think for us that, yes, there was behavioral traits, but trying to go to the doctor and get what those behavioral traits were diagnosed as was hopeless, because they were just putting it down to hormonal, or things happening at school and the way you were dealing with things, or your sport, or there was always another excuse other than you could have had an eating disorder. But the first physical appearance that we thought we were in trouble was on that holiday, where we went, oh my goodness, you have lost, like, you could physically see your bones sticking out. And so I think, for us, that was the first real sign that we had missed something and we were in trouble. And the fact that the behavior of how you were eating on that trip too, is when I first, I challenged you. I said, what is going on? Because I had caught you, you know, eating and then trying to throw it up. So I think, that was the first sign that, okay, we've got something else happening here. And I had no idea what that was. And I started to do some research, and when we got back, tried to get some help, as you know, and that ended up being 22 weeks of hell. But
Mm. It's interesting because obviously that physical indicator of me being seen in that manner on that camping trip initiated you then to seek external help. I know accompanied by the behavior that you witnessed, but the physical was an indicator for you. If you didn't see that, if I didn't lose, say I developed binge eating disorder or I developed bulimia and I had no physical appearance changes or no physical impact, do you think it would have been different?
yeah, probably a little bit, but I still know that your eating behavior had changed. So you had gone from being, you know, let's say 3 meals a day, fruit and veg, standard, whatever we've been taught to grow up with, eating plan, to a picky eater. I'm only going to eat this. Then you would go and gorge on something, and then you would have no dessert. Then you'd go and eat a whole tub of ice cream. Like it was so irregular patterns of eating that was a trigger for me too. Because I'm like, well, hang on, what is going on? Because you normally have not done this.
Mm,
So take the physical out of it. Your eating behavior had changed, and your
mm,
restrictions had changed.
mm,
You never had restrictions before, and all of a sudden restrictions had come in.
mm,
So, looking back, it was also, the physical side to me was the first shock, where I've gone, this is more serious than what I think it is. But
mm,
your behavior were the first triggers where I went, okay, something's going on here. I don't know what it is. I need to investigate. I tried to talk to you. You kind of, weren't open to having those discussions. I let it go for a little bit. I should have probably pressed on further, because, in hindsight, that's easy to say. But at the time, it was difficult to talk to you about it, because you were reactive, or you were,
defensive. Remember, I defended everything. Everything
yeah,
became a debate.
yeah. And so, and then on top of that, you've got family and friends commenting.
Mm,
You've got brothers commenting, you've got school commenting. So, you've got all these other extra pressures coming in where you're going, oh my Lord, something is really happening here, but I don't know what it is. So you go to a professional to try and get some answers, which, you know, I would love to say it's their fault, but it's not. Okay. They're not educated on it enough. And this is the whole problem with this space is that everybody gets a snippet of 5 minutes of education on eating disorders. And yet, it is becoming one of the biggest ways of dealing with a crisis in your life because it's so much about control. And I just think we need more education and awareness early so people can go, okay, you fit ABC in that, and ABC in the second column and ABC in the third column. Those three columns together are pointing towards you have a control issue, and maybe it's related with food, or maybe it's related with body image, or maybe it's related with something else. And I think we just need to be better educated as parents and as professionals to be able to go, okay, we don't want you to go down this path because it is a 10-year journey.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting hearing you speak about the first signs in terms of eating behaviors. And I remember specifically even you speaking then about the control aspect. And I think everybody throws around control when it comes to eating disorders as a broad thing. But I remember initially, and something that I see commonly, it's that transference from, say, it works better in a kid asset, essence, because I think if, you're a parent or a guardian and you know your kid and you're watching them, and for a while you make their meals. And so you're making, say, breakfast, or you're making lunch, or you're making dinner, and they're sitting down and they're consuming that. It shifts and changes throughout teenage years and whatnot. But I remember it went from me accepting what you were making and eating that to me not accepting it and going, oh, I'll just make something for myself. Or I'm not going to eat right now. Like that for me was the big change in control because I didn't want anyone else to control what was going inside of me. It was more, I'm going to make breakfast, I'm going to make lunch, I'm going to make dinner. I really needed to ensure that I had control over everything that was going into my body. So when you look at, I guess, change in behavior and eating behaviors, it's gone from accepting and enjoying anything that's made for you and not questioning it or not stressing about it to refusing to eat anything that someone else makes for you. But if I was put in a situation where I had to, and a lot of the time that was around dinner because, we still had to keep it a secret. So I couldn't say no to family dinners because for us, family dinners in the household were a big thing. Everyone sat down, everyone ate family dinner together. And so in that environment, I couldn't hide it. But the only way I could hide it is by consuming that meal and then disposing of it later. And so for me, that's how I feel the control slipped into my life and the first signs around the change of my eating behaviors occurred.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But I suppose a question for you, like, when and why did you think you needed to do that?
To control it, to control the food,
Yeah, like, obviously, without going into too much detail, we knew something was going on in your life, but why did you turn to an eating disorder?
I didn't think I was. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. I didn't think that I was letting in an eating disorder. Like when I got diagnosed, I was just as uneducated as you. I had no idea. I thought it was some diet skinny Victoria's Secret models go on to be catwalk walk worthy. Like I didn't think that was me. And the entire time, even when I continued to lose weight, I never thought I was thin or that I was losing weight. It wasn't an option for me. And I wasn't a person that was on the scales a lot. Like the scales wasn't a thing for me until it became a thing in recovery. So I wasn't, say, monitoring or seeing that I was making drastic body changes because I also had that body dysmorphia. So for me, there was no evidence to say that what I was doing was wrong because it was being encouraged by like family environments. I didn't have any measure to show that I was losing weight. And everywhere I looked, it was get fitter, get stronger, do more. And I was doing all of that. And I think when I turned to more than anything, when I turned to wanting to be healthier, I really just wanted to be liked. I wanted to fit in and I wanted to feel love and I wanted to feel of worth. And losing weight, being thin, being slim, being fitter and stronger for netball, I felt like in every category of my life, whether it was sport, whether it was family, whether it was my schooling, I was just behind and nobody knew me and I was invisible and I just wanted to be someone. And in sport, being someone, that meant, being at the top of the tier range. So I had to be fitter and stronger to reach that range. And in our family, to be seen or loved, I felt like that meant I had to do well in sport or do well in my academics. So I had to work harder. And then at school, in terms of friends, everyone started going on social media and everybody, all the popular girls and popular groups, they were all slim and in bikinis and looked a certain way. And to me, that ideal was the standard of being of worth to people. And so once I started, I had that little perfectionist head mindset that just thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have the goal and I'm just going to work really hard to just not even lose weight, just to be the best and to just keep trying to improve myself so someone will see me, so someone will hear me. And why I wanted that, why I wanted to be seen or heard, because long ago, that was all taken away from me when I went through those experiences when I was younger. And so I craved that. I craved that feeling of being seen or heard because that had been taken away at such a young age. And the eating disorder or the eating disorder behaviors were sold to me as the answer to fulfill all of that.
And do you think, like, going further into it, when you started hearing, like, the voice of anorexia, do you think that's kind of what encouraged you to keep going because that voice kind of gave you that? You were heard and you were seen by that?
I think more at the start, it wasn't being seen by a voice because I didn't see it as something external. I saw it as my own voice. So for me, it was more around, it wasn't like it was making me feeling like fulfilling those feelings of being seen or heard. It was more, it was giving me this sense of empowerment. It was giving me this sense of ownership. Every time I would say, finish a workout or finish something, it was like, oh, you've done a great job. I never received that positive feedback. It was always, Ash, you've got to do better. Ash, you've got to move your feet more. Ash, you're not there yet. You need to keep going. You're not doing well enough. And then in the family, say with my brothers that were going through a lot, it was just, Ash just wasn't even there. I just felt invisible. So it was almost like now I recognize it was an eating disorder voice, but that was actually acknowledging that I existed.
Mm,
It was actually telling me that, you know what, you're a real person and I see that and you're doing a good job, but only when you do this.
yeah,
You're a good person, but only when you skip that meal. And then once you're on this loophole, you then crave that. You crave that validation and you crave that feeling of like when I complete this task, then I'll get that feeling that I'm real and that I'm worthy. So I'm going to do that task. And then eventually, like once I got diagnosed, you get quite exhausted of hearing that voice over and over and over, that it becomes less about fulfilling the task to get the feeling and more about completing the task in hope that the voice will go away.
yeah,
And then you realize that you keep doing it, but the voice never goes. And so you're constantly on this wheel of like doing everything that it says, obeying everything in hope that it will then leave, but it never leaves. So you're on this loop and you're just stuck.
Yeah.
And that's where it's in this weird way you realize that there's no getting out of this. And that's where I think a lot of people lose hope during recovery is I can't fight this voice. Like I keep trying to, people say you just got to keep fighting the voice and then it'll disappear. But you do the task to hope to get it away, it's still there. You don't do the task, the voice is still there. And you're like, I cannot win. I cannot escape this.
Yeah. So I've got a
Um,
question. I've got a question for you. Do you think, I suppose, like we seem to see a big increase in eating disorders at the moment. So do you think, in your opinion, that it's from the environment of family or the environment of social media expectations of what a body should function or look like? And the reason I ask this is because, I grew up in a household where weight was always talked about. And I'm sure my mum grew up in a household where weight was always talked about. Not necessarily in a negative way, but in a way that was not so much implied that you needed to lose weight, but a woman's body was always commented on. And, you know, my upbringing was always my mum on diets, or when a new diet came out, they'd talk about it and, they'd say, oh, we need to lose so many kilos to be, healthier, or I need to lose so many kilos to fit into this dress. And so, I got brought up with that. And then subconsciously, do you think that then I portray that onto you and then you portray that onto this generational thing? Or do you think now social media has taken over that?
I think there is never one thing that encourages someone to pursue a path of an eating disorder. I think there are environments. And I think one of the biggest things is people's personalities and their personality traits. Like I fit the mold. Have a very addictive personality. I'm that type A perfectionist and all or nothing. And I think whatever I put my mind to, whether positive or negative, I take it that probably next step into an extreme because I want it to be perfect and I want to do everything to the best of my ability, even at the expense of my own health or burnout or whatever that looks like. So I think, often when we look at people, it's, what separates everyone has, say, poor body image days, or everyone has eating disorder or disordered eating related like thoughts or behaviors. But what separates the personalities, I think, is the environment and, as I mentioned, the personality. So I was in the perfect environment, and today I think a lot of people are in the perfect environment for that to occur. I think we have a lot more mental health challenges and adversity that we're facing in forms that we're not used to. A lot of it is online pressures, a lot of it is a changing world. And I think we've advanced so much that our brains are not even capable of processing where we're at. And it's creating a lot of space for people to be a lot more confused, to not understand who they are. Because I think things like, trauma and, as you said, body image issues and a woman's body, they have always been there. Trends and cycles
Yeah.
always come around. I mean, you look at it even now, they've said that skinny was out and now it's coming back again. Like it's just how it works. I think how we're exposed to it has changed. So
Yeah.
instead of, seeing it on a newspaper or people on the
Magazines.
news every now and then, yeah, now it's 24/7 at your access, non-filtered.
Yeah.
So I think that constant exposure, we can't deny that our brains are now regularly focusing on an ideal 24/7 and calculating that this is how I have to look, this is how I have to behave, rather than seeking or figuring that out for ourselves. So we're
Yeah.
constantly fed what we should be like. And for a young person, like as adults, we can't understand or process that. How do we expect young people to?
Oh,
And they
correct.
talk about the added pressures of, trying to perform at school, dealing in a household where they may not have two parents involved. They may have their own traumas that they're going through. Then adding on the pressures of schooling, body image. It's a perfect storm for someone to look to a coping mechanism. I don't think it's always eating disorder specific. I think that depends what they're exposed to. So I think it's increased because social media provides eating disorders or disordered eating as almost like the better coping mechanism. Like you don't really see smoking advertised as much or drugs as much. One, people can't afford it, and two, it's not as easily accessible or glamorized as pursuing changing the way that you look.
Mm.
So social media enhances that coping mechanism and makes it easier for people to hide it because it's glamorized. So it's almost right in front of everyone's face. And as soon as something comes in that doesn't go their way, or something comes in that traumatizes them a little bit, or that they feel really stressed about, it's right there. All the information, everything in terms of how you can pursue disordered eating that can lead to an eating disorder. And when you have that sort of access and you're not going to have anyone question you about it, because as we know, so many stereotypes with eating disorders that people commonly miss them and commonly turn a blind eye to them, that they've increased because we're neglecting the fact that they're even a real illness in the first place.
Yeah. And I think too, us as human beings, expectations, I think as parents and as mentors for our children, we just have to have realistic expectations. And that's what we went through is probably one thing that's come up for us, is just to accept you for who you are and not what we want as parents for you, but what you want as an individual and to support that. And yeah, so I think, yeah, it's definitely if there's one thing you can take away, if you can somehow change your environment to support the individual as the person and not what your expectations of that individual are. And, another lesson from us is mind your language on
Mm,
on how on how I used to talk about myself because
mm,
you forget that subconsciously you're taking that in.
mm,
And you know it's hard, it's a fine line because you want to be free in your home to speak how you want to speak, and and I suppose create this loving unconditional environment where everyone can have free speech and blah, blah, blah. But I just think sometimes when there is triggers happening or there is an illness starting to be present, I think it's important to watch how you speak about yourself and about others and be very supportive and be curious about that person and what's going on as an individual, not what you're expecting of them.
mm. And I think when I speak to parents, and obviously in the work that we do, it's not so much what you say. It does have an impact if you're directly speaking to the person, but it's also what you do. And I remember specifically with witnessing, you talk about when you were younger, and even as you was a mum, when you did speak about going on a diet, or I remember like concretely in my mind, you body checking a lot. So like going into the mirror, trying on clothes, which is a natural thing. Like I'm not saying it's wrong. It's like we all do it. But it was then embedded in me, before you left or before you went out to cover up your roles or to like wear bigger dresses to like hide certain things or my flabby arms or my pot belly. That stuck with me. And in my head, it was always, I don't want to be that because looking at my mum, that's what she really didn't like about herself. And so if she doesn't like that about herself, I shouldn't like that about myself. And if I don't want people not to like me because of that. So I was always running from that flabby
Yeah,
stomach, running
yeah,
from those bigger arms. And sometimes you wouldn't even say it, but it's just you looking in the mirror and turning and looking a certain way. And as young kids, you look to the people that raise you to show you who you are and how you should act. So I can't emphasize enough that yes, it is what you say and what you say to your kids, but it's also how you live your life authentically. And remember, they're always watching. They may not look like it, but they're always watching.
Yeah. Yeah, correct. Yeah. And
Um,
it's hard to break that generational teachings, right? Because you only learn from what you've been taught from your previous parenting and grandparents and whatever. And, back when I grew up, it was quite common for males to comment on female bodies, and you just had to accept it. You didn't challenge it. And, and I hope as a parent that I've educated you that that's not the case anymore.
mm,
And unfortunately, we had to go through something that's quite, traumatic for you to understand that you can be confident in your body and love it. And really, the food is just the byproduct. The food is the fuel that makes you have that amazing operational body.
mm. Yeah, it's sad sometimes that you've got to go through adversity to learn these lessons on your own, and to figure out and probably like unlearn everything that you have learnt. I mean, it's a long journey, as we've said, like 10 years
Yeah,
plus going through it.
correct. Correct. And I think too, yeah, I remember someone saying to me that following someone else's map is not necessarily the best thing for your body. And it's trying to find your own map for your body and your future, and trying to understand yourself and all of those learnings. And it's a lot when you're a young person to be able to navigate that. So, I think there is a lot more pressures on young people to know who they are earlier. And that's sad because you only know from experiences, right? And from age and from going through things. And, hopefully us talking about these things a little bit more, people don't have to go down this path.
Mm. No, it is it's interesting, I said, knowing what we know now, how much education there actually is out there about eating disorders once, and when you're going through it, you don't realize it. But I think as well, we've created that path and hopefully created that path for other people to step into as well. And I mean, today's topic was all about, the secret illness, the things that we don't see and we don't recognize, and how the illness is hidden and thrives off that secrecy. And you summed it up perfectly when, I mean, you named our charity The Secret Burden, knowing from the start that it was a secret for so long before it became a burden. And not only a burden to me, but a burden to our whole family. So I
Oh,
think
and
there's a,
it's yeah, and sorry to cut you off. And it's a and it's a burden to community as well, right? Because the thing that still amazes me, and we've been doing this what now, nearly 10 years, going through talking about, you know, that was one thing when you first were diagnosed, and everyone that I spoke to that had a previous eating disorder with their child or loved one said to me, just run. You're never going to get over this. No one's ever going to talk. Like the feedback I got from other people were, this is just horrendous. You're not going to, like, just run. Just let it go. Just run. And I'm like, what's going on? And so that's why I didn't want to be secret when we were diagnosed. I don't know if you remember, like, I text all our friends and family and said, this is what it is, and this is what it means for us. And that's why I created the Facebook page, because I didn't want to hide this. I didn't want to make it a secret, because it's not a death sentence. It's a challenge. And with the right support, I think you can get through it. Whether you fully get over it, we're still debating. I think it's good management that help you control this the rest of your life. But it also gives you so much joy, because you learn so much about yourself and about what works and what doesn't work. And I found that fascinating, and that's what I like to share. But one thing, I would like to say is that keep talking about it. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't hide away from it, because it still has this stigma of being this dirty little secret.
mm,
And I don't think it should be, because, you know, comments like we've received in the past, you know, from only, a couple of weeks ago when we had our little fundraiser, and people going, you know, oh, you're selling, you're selling sausages, but you've got an eating disorder. Like that
Oh,
mentality
yeah.
of they think about a sausage is an eating, and I'm just like, that frustrates me because it's actually not about the food. The
Mm,
food is the fuel to get you better, but it's about control of everything.
mm,
And I think that perception has to change because people still think just get her, or get, shouldn't say her, just get them to eat and everything will be okay. It is not about that.
mm. It's so true. And which leads me into the final part of today's spin-off of the Disordered series, the first episode. Mum doesn't actually know about this, but I decided, knowing that we were doing this series, that we are so big on community and we have an amazing community out there that does support us from the day dot, from the day that the Facebook page was created all that time ago when I was first diagnosed to where we are now. Out, I can now say nationally delivering our programs in terms of education and awareness for eating disorders. But I put a poll out knowing that this episode was going to call The Secret Illness, and I asked people if they had any questions specifically targeted that they wanted answered during our podcast series and specifically to this episode. And I thought, I could do an easy one where I could just be like, you know what, we just have to both answer it. But knowing it's a unique mother-daughter duo that we've had from day dot, I want us to answer it based on me being in your shoes, Mum, and you potentially being in my shoes. Now, of course, we're not going to know exactly from that perspective, but we've been in each other's remedy for long enough to understand this area and understand from similar perspectives without walking in those shoes. So, I am only going to pick one question because I know we can lose people when we keep doing more questions, but I'm so grateful for everyone that sent in their questions. There was actually quite a lot, which I'm often surprised with because I think when we start this and when we started this, I often just think I am talking to a wall and or I'm talking to you, Mum, and I think nobody like listens and nobody really cares that much. Like we're just doing our thing here. And when you really work from home or you work from not a base as such, you don't get to see the community that you're touching until you actually go out into the community. So it's been amazing to see how we've grown and how many people actually do support us and actually do listen to us. I'm not just talking to a wall. So I did randomly pick a question, and I followed the like any, mini, money, mo concept because that's the only concept I sort of know. Um, and it is this question from, I'm going to keep it anonymous because obviously this is a hard
Yeah.
subject to talk about. But the question was around the secret illness. When you both first witnessed or were exposed to the eating disorder, did you have a fear of losing control? Now, Mum, want you to answer that as if you were me, based on what you know. And as a parent in this concept, I'm going to answer it in the sense of fear of losing control in losing control of my daughter and her life. And Mum, I'm going to make you go first.
Knowing what we went through with you, would you have the fear of losing control? I would say no, because you had the mindset of there was nothing wrong with you. So I don't think you had that fear of losing anything. However, once you were admitted into hospital with your treatment team, I would say yes. I think there was a lot of fear around you losing, not, I'm going to say losing your best friend, if that makes sense, because the control was a friend for you. And I remember vividly you saying to me, what am I going to do once it's gone? And I think, so yes, I think there's two parts to that question. I think before you were diagnosed, no, there was no fear because you just didn't think anything was happening or and nothing was wrong with you. You thought we were all the crazy ones.
I'm going to answer it obviously playing the mother role and pretending that I have myself as my own daughter. Um, And I would think that, yeah, like I would have a fear. I don't think control is probably the right word. I think my fear would be losing her and knowing I could not do anything about it, and knowing that she's sick and that I cannot help her, or I can't physically make her eat, or, and to be honest, like a lot of people, say in our experience, like, how did you do that to your daughter? And I feel like if I had a daughter, I would do the same. Like, I would do everything I possibly could to get the food in if I knew she was dying. And especially once you're aware of it and you're aware of the severity, I think I couldn't live with selfishly, probably the guilt of knowing that I didn't do everything I possibly could to save their life, even if it looked like an absurdity from the outside. So I think my fear would be more around losing the control of their life and their recovery, like knowing I had to leave it up to them. That would be so hard. But I'm also a control freak as it is. So it would be really hard to even raise a young person to then realize I've got to step out of their life eventually.
Yeah. Let's just clarify though. I think you're talking about someone that you still have control of. So you're talking about someone that's under the age of 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think if you're talking about someone over that age, it's a completely different scenario. Lucky
Mm.
for us, yes, we're in that situation. But yeah, if you want me to answer it quickly I agree
Go
with that.
ahead. I
But
knew you were going to. I knew I could
no,
see
no,
you
no.
sitting there to
I'm
say it.
just,
Just go.
did I ever have fear of losing control? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'd be lying if I said I was every morning I woke up and I checked you were breathing. I was terrified. And but I also knew that I couldn't. I'm not. I don't give up. I'm not a quitter. I follow things through, and I just knew I had to throw everything I could at it, and that meant. And this is what I wanted to say previously because I've had a few people ask me about relationships, and I was willing to sacrifice our relationship as mother and daughter to keep you alive and do what I had to do. And if I can say anything, is that look at us now.
Mm.
All right, we are still friends. We still talk. We still have, a mother daughter relationship. It mightn't be the same as other mother daughter relationships if you want to compare it to whatever. But I think we are two strong female individuals that can really talk about things honestly. And I think I cherish that every day, that I still have you here to talk to.
Mm.
And I had to sacrifice that because I know you hated me and hated what I was doing, but I just had to. I was your mother, and I brought you into this world, and I wasn't going to let you leave this world without a fight. So I think any parent out there that's going through that, that's thinking that, oh, I want to cherish our relationship. Well, you got to weigh up. Do you want the relationship, or do you want the person to be here, alive and strong? And because you can always rebuild that relationship. It might take time, but you can rebuild it.
I think that's a beautiful way to end it, and thank you so much for answering that. Definitely answered it better than I did if I was a mother. Jeez. Um, but you've had some years of experience. So thank you once again for everything that you've done for me and continue to do for me. And it is true, our relationship is blossoming now. I still pull my hair out when we have our own little blues, but it's part of relationships. And I think I'm so grateful that we are where we are today and can have these thorough and honest conversations together and in a professional space. So the grace and the privilege is all mine. So thank you, Mum. Thank you, of course, as well for co-hosting today. This is the first of, I don't know how many we'll do, but we'll see how we go. But the amount of questions that I received from the first one, it seems like it's needed a lot more education and conversation in this space. So hopefully we can keep leading these. We'll be back next time with another episode talking about an alternate topic. So stay tuned to get some more questions in. But in the meantime, do yourself a favor and just be kind to yourself, look after yourself, and become educated and continue to join this conversation because it's one that needs to be had. We're happy to lead it, but we need you to walk with us through it. So thank you, everyone. And once again, thank you, Mum, for joining.